Okay, most guys want to express things like credibility, authority, self-respect, dignity, mastery, friendliness, openness, but those look very different in different worlds. Almost like with language. In English, you say bread, and in Spanish, you say pan. The words are different, but the meaning is the same. And so just like there are different languages that can express the same thing through different vocal sounds, there are different languages that can express the same thing through different sartorial or different clothing aspects. It just depends on who you're with. Do they speak the same language, where you live? And the reality is anytime I bring on a client, I have no idea what that looks like for them in their world. That's why we do all of this digging, to be able to figure that out. It is not just limited to your clothing. It has to do with any sort of aesthetic. Guys will use these principles to figure out what kind of car they want to drive when it's time to buy a new one. And so possibilities are kind of limitless when it comes to understanding this structure and these principles.
Tanner, my brother, welcome to the Superhuman Life.
Frank, I'm excited to be here, man. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely, man. I've really been looking forward to this as well. I think it's an important conversation, and I'm sure if you polled most men, they wouldn't say fashion or style is at the top of the most important conversation. So to kind of kick today's conversation off, why is style or fashion a topic that men need to be aware of and be putting attention into?
Such an interesting question, because most guys are just like, that's stupid. I don't have any reason to care about this. And I think what most guys should be paying attention to is why there's so much antipathy for style, why there's so much resistance to it. Because if you're a self-development minded person, you have most of these areas that you'll think about. You'll think about your fitness, you'll think about your finances, you'll think about your relationships, you'll think about your own self-identity, you'll think about your language and your knowledge and all of these other things. Why so adverse to the idea that your appearance or that your clothing matters? And for most of us, the fact that there is such a strong negative reaction to it, and a lot of times that negative reaction is kind of hidden as indifference. Like, I don't care how I look. It's like, well, you probably do. Otherwise, you wouldn't be so insistent that you don't care. And so think about why you have this negative reaction. And really the main reason that this matters is because our appearance is just as integrated with our own identity, our own sense of selves, what it is we want to express to the rest of the world, as our written languages, as our spoken languages, as anything else that we use to better understand who we are or to better understand how we fit in with the rest of the world. We judge ourselves by how we look. We judge other people by how they look. They judge us by how we look. And there's a back and forth and a give and take, and it's its own language that we're better off if we learn to speak it or learn to use it, as opposed to just pretending like it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I love that, man. And I love your whole approach, around the self-development kind of, angle to this. Interesting question here, in terms of maybe a hierarchy of self-development. You mentioned a couple things, right? Your fitness, your health, your finances, maybe your own kind of growth, your personal growth. Where would you rate, style or fashion in that hierarchy?
I love this. This is one of my favorite things about what I do, because I'm sure that you get this all the time, where you bring on guys that are really good at what they do, but they get this kind of self-inflated sense of importance that, like, you get my thing figured out and everything about your life is smooth sailing. Like, you get your relationships figured out, everything falls into place. You get your fitness figured out and everything. And that matters. You can even think about it from like an entrepreneurial perspective. I'm sure a lot of you guys who are listening know that, you make money by focusing on health, wealth, and relationships. Like, those are the big three. Style, maybe secondary, most likely like tertiary, like really not super high up in the hierarchy, but it doesn't mean that it isn't in the hierarchy and that it doesn't matter.
Going back to the first question we talked about, where it doesn't seem to be as important in today's world. You go back to the 40s, 50s. I mean, guys were dressed to the nines, right? You look at old photos. It's like people on an airplane as they traveled, they're in suits. It was just like there was a different time. When did the shift become? I mean, have you looked into this? Do you have your own kind of take on when it became, I guess, less of a priority in a man's life?
Yeah, I think that this really started to shift around the baby boomers and kind of within that generation, because there was a rejection of all things that were Western civilization prior to that. And a lot of Western civilization, men absolutely, in fact, historically, men have always cared about how they look. Just go look at the warrior class of any different civilization, and the men are always the ones who are most concerned with what their clothing is and how it looks and all of that. And so this is not something that's just unique to the West, but you get into this generation and kind of like the sexual revolution and all of these other things, and you develop this antipathy for everything that your parents stood for. And part of it was the dignity of dressing well. And so what do these guys do? They play this indifference of, I don't care how I look, but at the same time, they tease each other and they pick on each other. How old are you?
39.
Okay, same thing, 39. You know what it was like to get teased because your shorts were too short, or because you tucked in your shirt into your pants and you looked like a grandpa, or there were all these pejoratives that we would call each other when we were kids that we can't use anymore, or the show will get canceled. But there were all the things that you would tease your buddies about, or you would get teased about if you looked like you cared too much about your appearance. And so it wasn't that you cared any less or that guys do care any less. It was just that the emotional investment in it went from caring about dressing well into caring about looking like you don't give a crap about how you dress. And so this is now the masculine aesthetic, is I have to look like I don't care. And if I do look like I care about it, I'm shameful, I'm effeminate, I'm gay, I'm unmanly, I'm whatever the term is that was thrown at you or that you continue to throw at yourself as a way to convince yourself that the only way to dress like a man is to look like you don't give a crap about your appearance.
I can remember in the early 2000s. So I graduated high school in 2002, and I thrust myself into corporate work pretty quickly. Right, I didn't do a 4-year degree, so I was dressing in suits, and I kind of fell into. I say fell into. I was very fortunate and blessed to have some early success in my 20s, and I started getting into men's health and reading GQ. And I don't know if you remember in the early 2000s, there was this term
Yep,
metrosexual.
metrosexual. Yep.
What is your take on that? Is that something that is still kind of around? I mean, I remember it was like the clean shave and the facial, like, the shaving of the arms. It was like it almost had a feminine appeal to it. I mean, is this something that is still kind of discussed in your circle? And what are your thoughts around that?
Not really anymore. You get terms that have very kind of like specific connotations with different timelines where you will get metrosexual or lumbersexual or hipster or other things that as time progresses and things move on, people don't have the same kind of connotations and associations with that. I would say that most guys who fell into that more metrosexual camp either found that it really wasn't a threat to any sort of masculinity whatsoever, or they took it even further and started going into androgyny or even like transsexualism or other things like that. And so it doesn't stay in that mid space anymore. It's either gone more in one direction or more in the opposite direction. So yeah, there's not the same kind of like aversion. I don't think metrosexual is a term that I've seen for a long time.
Got it. Yeah. Can we talk a little bit about your journey into doing this work? Yeah, take us back, man. I mean, was this something from an early age you were paying attention to your clothing, and how did you kind of end up doing this full time?
Yeah, so it started for me, man, junior high school, because I think most guys are this way, where you're kind of shaping your identity, junior high, high school, stuff like that. I was really, really big into BMX bikes, punk and ska music, like that whole like late 90s, early 2000s scene. I also graduated in 2002. And at the same time, I was attending a junior high school that was a private Christian school. And so I had to wear the rep stripe tie, the gray slacks, the navy blazer, and all of it. And so I was really kind of caught between these two very aesthetically driven worlds where if I would go to a show at a buddy's basement on the weekend and I didn't have the right band patches on my battle jacket, or my belt didn't have enough spikes on it, or my hair didn't have enough spikes in it, then I was a poser. Or if I was too goth or too skater, then I wasn't punk enough, or I wasn't BMX enough, or whatever else. And at the same time, at this private school, if my shirt was untucked, then that was a sign of a lack of integrity and a sign of rebellion and these other things. And so I was very kind of thrust in these two very aesthetically driven worlds. And there was a lot of dissonance for me because I identified with one, I didn't identify with the other, but morally I was too afraid to rebel against the one, and all of this. And so there was a lot of really kind of a lot of heartache for me about my appearance and the way that I would see myself in the mirror, the way that other people would treat me. And so pretty early on, it made me fairly sensitive to it. Fast forward a few years, I served a mission for my church where I wore a suit and a tie and a black name tag all the time and really struggled with like the rules of I had to part my hair every day because I didn't like that. Get home from that, I work in a bank, and I start to realize that my skate punk emo aesthetic is no longer letting me get the goals that I want. I'm not attracting the girls that I'm interested in. I'm not getting the career advancements that I want. And so I slowly start to make a change. It turned into a job when I started a blog about it 12 years ago, where I just thought, this is interesting and guys don't talk about this stuff in the way that I think that they should. I would talk about it specifically from a masculinity perspective, like how it relates to men and masculinity. Even from early on, it was more of like a pickup perspective. And then it just continued to build steam, build momentum. And when we were about to have our first kid, who's about to turn 11, my wife and I both knew we wanted her to be able to stay home full time. I wasn't making enough money at my banking job to be able to make up for her income if she quit her job. And I started selling like $25 consultations to guys that were on my mailing list of like 200 people. And it just kind of like started to blossom out from there. I got a few years experience working in custom suiting. And then now it's been the full-time gig for almost 6 years now that I work exclusively with like one-on-one and small groups of guys. And I teach guys how to think about this in a way that they don't have those identity dissonances or those problems. They can be really congruent in who they are on the inside and who they are on the outside.
Yeah, I love that. I love that story, man. And congrats for able to, take what was a pain at one point in your life, right? And, turned into a passion, and now it's become very, very profitable. The work you do, who are these men? I mean, is your, like, have you, like, do you know your avatar? Like, is it a specific guy? Is it a stage of life? The ones that you're specifically working with, the guys that come to you, who are these guys?
I would say that my most specific avatar, like the thing that's most, because I will get guys that are blue collar business owners or empty nesters or guys that are just graduating from college or kind of like anything and everything in between. But the most consistent thing is that it's a guy who's going through some sort of phase or transition in his life where his identity is no longer as solid as it used to be. And he's recognizing that it's either been built on a lie and he needs to find out who he really is, or it's true, but it's not as complete as what he thought it was. And he's trying to get a bigger, better, more full version of himself. And part of that is changing who he sees in the mirror so that he can see that bigger, better, more full version of himself too. And so it's always guys that are in some sort of flux with the entirety of what their identity is.
Yeah, can you walk us maybe somewhat through your process? Guy comes to you. I mean, where do you start with him? Like, is he sending you photos of his closet? Is he sending you photos of what he looks like? Do you have to see his body? Because I mean, I'm sure there's so many variables in what's going to look good. So, how do you initially get started with building a style for a guy?
So the very first thing we do is we do go through their closets together. And there's two kind of levels of what we're looking at. On the surface, it's the really basic stuff like I will tell you what fits, what can be tailored, and what needs to be gotten rid of. It will give me an idea of what your build and your proportions are, colors and simple things like that. But the real reason that I start with those guys, that deeper level, is as we talk through everything that they own, they will tell me, this is the stuff that I feel like $1,000,000 in. And I don't know why, but it's like my lucky shirt. And I just feel fantastic in this. Or these are the shoes that my wife bought and she loves them, but I hate them, but I still wear them because, she thinks they look great. Or I haven't worn this thing for 10 years, but I can't bring myself to throw it away. Because what I'm trying to do is every single guy on at least a subconscious level has a sense of identity in the way that he dresses. Otherwise, we wouldn't dress the way that we do. It's almost like an emotional security blanket. And so when I start with these guys, I want to dig deep and understand why they feel the way they do about their clothing, because it's really easy to make somebody quote unquote stylish. Like I can give you a shopping list today that will say these are the things that are on trend or work with your coloring or work with your proportions. But if it doesn't work with your sense of self or where you live in the world or what you do for a living or what your goals and aspirations are, who gives a crap if it's stylish? It becomes a real negative for your life instead of a positive. And so I have to start with those real deep identity questions of who are you? What do you want? How are you already subconsciously doing that with your clothing so that we can double down on what they're doing well, eradicate what they're not doing well, and then that's how the process gets started. So it's really deep, like psychological identity work before we ever even get to the clothing. In fact, my guys, I don't take my guys, like we don't talk about shopping until we're 2 months into the process because we have to do all this prep work before time.
Other than identity, what variables in a guy's life? I mean, age, you mentioned maybe employment, social status, relationship status. Are these all variables that will play? I mean, is a married guy typically going to dress different than a guy that's single? Is a IT guy going to dress different than a finance guy? Like how do these other areas of our life? I guess these are a part of shaping our identity, but can you speak to any
Yeah.
of this?
Yeah. So what I do is I break it down into kind of like three big pillars or like three legs of the stool that your style is built on. First one is just simple aesthetics, because a guy who is 6'8" and 250 pounds at 6% body fat is going to look different in clothing than a guy who's 5'4" at 180 pounds, but he's at 30% body fat, right? And so these things come into play. It's your height, your weight, your proportions, your color, your contrast. And a lot of guys hear this and go, crap, I don't want to think about all that stuff. But the nice thing is once you know that stuff, it actually makes decision fatigue go away. It makes it really easy to know what kind of stuff you're looking for, because you could say, I know that these colors work or these proportions work or these patterns work and these ones don't. So I don't even have to think about it. So we start with just kind of these like simple aesthetic rules. What's going to fit on your body? What's going to work in that regard? The second thing we focus on is this idea of communication. Because you're right, a married guy is going to want to communicate different things than a single guy. A guy who's 60 is going to want to communicate different things than a guy who's 20. A guy who was in a blue collar industry is going to want to communicate things different than a guy who's white collar. If you're in Vienna, Austria, you're going to be different than somebody who's in Las Vegas, Nevada. And so you get all of these things that are what you do for a living, the people that are around you, the phase you're in life, and all of that. And we learn how to communicate the things you want to communicate. Most guys want to express things like credibility, authority, self-respect, dignity, mastery, friendliness, openness, but those look very different in different worlds. Almost like with language, where you can say, I don't know why I'm thinking of this, but like in English, you say bread, and in Spanish, you say pan. And so like the words are different, but the meaning is the same. And so just like there are different languages that can express the same thing through different vocal sounds, there are different languages that can express the same thing through different sartorial or different clothing aspects. It just depends on who you're with. Do they speak the same language, where you live, what all that stuff is, right? And so we get to tackle all of that. And the reality is anytime I bring on a client, I have no idea what that looks like for them in their world. That's why we do all of this digging to be able to figure that out. And then the third aspect of it is this idea of self-perception. How do we get it so that you see on the outside what you believe about yourself on the inside? Because most guys, if they take the time to think about it, if they really take a second and look at themselves in the mirror and you ask them, is the guy that you see, if you were to see a stranger dressed like you are right now, would you assume he has the same morals, the same values, the same goals, the same aspirations that you do? Or do you just automatically override that because you know yourself? And is there dissonance there between the two? Because ideally what we want is what you see in the mirror or on your wife's social media when she's posting family photos, or on your dating profiles if you're in the dating world, or the family photo that you take every year and hangs over the mantle, or whatever it may be. You want to look like the person you actually are. You want that congruence instead of that dissonance. And that's where confidence comes from. That's where self-respect and self-acceptance comes from. And it's not just that. Again, this is not primary, this is tertiary, but this supplements all the work that you're doing by dialing your fitness or your finances or your relationships or going to therapy or all of these other things. Like, it helps supplement all of this other heavy work that guys are doing.
Outside of the clothes, I mean, what other thing? I mean, you're well groomed, right? You got a
You're grooming.
great beard. I mean, are you looking at jewelry? Obviously, we've mentioned health and fitness. Like, is this something you're advising your guys on? Hey, we can put $1,000 suit on you, but if you don't do something about your health, like, and you don't drop the 20 pounds, like it's not going to look right. So how in depth are you going outside of just the clothes with your guys?
So what I end up usually doing with them is we always talk about how it relates to a fitness perspective. Because even when I start with guys, I got to know, like, are you where you want to be? Are you working towards a target weight? How soon are we going to get there? Are we bulking? Are we cutting? Because even from just like a logistics perspective, are we buying clothes that are going to fit you or not? And all of that. We definitely talk about grooming, accessories, tattoos, all of those types of things. But then what's really cool is that these principles are applicable to anything that has to do with aesthetics. And so I will see as I work with my clients that, like, their offices start to look better. Their Zoom backgrounds look a little bit different as they make more progress. Or I've had guys that are telling me, my wife and I are building a house and we're not arguing about it as much anymore because I'm able to actually express what it is that I want because I have these aesthetic principles. Or I have other guys who take these same things and they create uniforms for their employees, or it helps them shape logos or like what they want their lobbies and their businesses to look like. And so it is not just limited to your clothing. It has to do with any sort of aesthetic. Guys will use these principles to figure out what kind of car they want to drive when it's time to buy a new one. And so the possibilities are kind of limitless when it comes to understanding this structure and these principles.
Yeah. I want to ask you about, I guess budgeting, right? I mean, this is obviously something, that is going to be important for a lot of people. I mean, not everybody's got the ability to go out and, get custom tailored shirts and clothing. Is there, there's obviously percentages that they recommend, like in terms of your rent. Like, if you make a certain amount of money, you take this percent and this is what you can put towards your rent and then your car. And like, is there a set amount of your income that should be dedicated to how you look? How do you kind of process all this with your guys?
Yeah, I've had clients that will end up paying $1,500 for an entire wardrobe, and other guys that are 50 grand and still going at it, and kind of like everything in between, And so the way that I talk about it with my guys is we look at this through the lens of effort and energy drains versus energy boosts. And what I want their relationship with their clothing to be in as many different regards as possible is I want it to be an energy boost. And so if it's a big drain for you to be thinking about your budget, then that means that you can invest in more versatile pieces that you can wear more frequently and that they work with other pieces more often. So you get a more interchangeable wardrobe. Or if budget is a concern, then maybe you're willing to go to the thrift store every Wednesday when they get a new shipment in and go thumb through stuff and see what you can find. Or you're willing to shop deals on, President's Day sales or Labor Day sales or whatever else it may be. For other guys, the energy boost is in I actually want a bigger variety. I don't want to feel limited in what my clothing is, and money isn't an issue. And so I'd rather spend the money to get more variety, or I don't mind spending more money if it means that I don't have to spend all the time doing the bargain hunting or anything else. And so there's not a right or a wrong answer. This is one of the things I dedicate an entire call with each of my guys to figure out what are your own individual drains and boosts so that we can figure out how much effort you're putting into your style so that it's something that's sustainable and enjoyable as you continue to go through the process.
Yeah, what's your thoughts around, I think Steve Jobs was maybe the first one that kind of said this, and then Zuckerberg's kind of followed. You see these kind of, these high profile billionaires, it's like they wear the same t-shirt and jeans every single day to eliminate the need to make a decision. Do you get guys that come to you and say, "Hey, I don't, I want to make this as simple as possible. So, can I find a uniform where it's a black t-shirt and then maybe I accessorize it?" Like, what are your thoughts around, building a uniform for a guy?
Yeah, I think for a lot of guys, a personal uniform is actually a really good approach. In fact, I have a coach or a program that's called the personal uniform that really helps kind of like outline those principles and how to think about it and what to do, because it is a really good way to get started. And again, it comes down to this idea of effort. For some guys, they want to maintain, like they want to put in that minimal amount of effort so they can feel confident and they can look good in what they're wearing. And then they're mentally freed up to focus on other things. Other guys may find that it's like, okay, that was a really good start, but I feel constricted. I feel bored. I feel like I'm not actually being expressive or communicative. I'm not actually being congruent or authentic enough. And so I want to start to expand beyond the uniform. Other guys are just like, uniforms are stupid. I want to be able to have a ton of variety and play around with it all the way. And so again, there's not a morally right or a wrong approach. It's what's going to fit best in with your lifestyle and has you put in the right amount of effort for the right amount of reward so that you can be freed up to focus on the other things that you should be paying attention to as well.
Got it. No, I appreciate. Yeah. Can we get somewhat a little tactical here? Just kind of, maybe give the guys some things. First, suits. Like, it's a lot of us work from home these days, right? And it's like we're not going in the office. Like, should every guy have a black, blue, gray suit? What are your thoughts around suits?
Suits are a 20th century symbol of status and power, and we are not in the 20th century anymore. And so I would say it's probably worth it to have one for things like funerals and jury duty and stuff like that, because we're not entirely out of the 20th century. You still want to wear it to a wedding. You still want to wear it to stuff like that. And if you do, get a good navy one or a mid gray. Black's usually too formal. But in most businesses, guys aren't wearing suits anymore. And if you're in an industry where you're still wearing suits, you know that. But for the rest of us, like if there's any question about it, you probably don't need it and you don't need to do it. That's the mistake a lot of guys still make is you go back into the 20th century. And it was always, if you wanted to dress better, you would up your formality. If everybody's in jeans and a t-shirt, you do a polo and slacks. Or if everybody's in a polo and slacks, you do a button-up shirt and some trousers. Or then you go a full suit. But again, we're not in the 20th century anymore. Our elites, like our highest status guys, like Zuckerberg and Jobs and Bezos, these guys aren't wearing suits. They completely are. In fact, for most guys who are at kind of like the top of the financial echelon, it is a flex that they can wear whatever the crap they want. And it's the guys who work for them that are the ones that are wearing the suits. And so that was already starting to die. I would say COVID kind of put the nail in the coffin of that, where you get lockdowns and work from home and all of that. And so a suit is not something that I would say needs to be top of mind. At some point, you'll probably need one and it will need to count. And so still do it right, but put your energy elsewhere because you're going to get a lot more bang for your buck by focusing on other things first.
Okay. So what are some of the non-negotiables that every guy needs to have in his closet?
We don't have those anymore because we're not a homogenous culture anymore. It used to be that you go back 50 years and everybody was watching the same TV shows because that was all there was. You turned to channel 3 and it was on at the same time. Like we were a homogenous culture. But now because of the internet, we're different balkanized cultures. Different industries have different dress standards, different cultures, different music scenes, different political ideas and philosophies do. And so the thing that I would say is probably the most tactical advice that I can give you is pay attention to the way that you're already dressing and the way that everybody else around you dresses, whether that's at work or at the gym or at church or on dates or wherever else it is that you are, and then do it better. And by better, I don't mean more formal. I mean, make it fit better, choose higher quality materials, and then focus on colors that work well for you and make it so people pay attention to you instead of getting distracted by your clothing. So if everybody else is in jeans and t-shirts and sneakers, but they're in like crappy, Skechers and jeans that are 3 sizes too big and 8 inches too long, and it's a graphic t-shirt that basically is saying my identity is rooted in the fact that I like this craft beer, or my company hosted this 5K 10 years ago and I can't be bothered to find a better t-shirt. Do a plain t-shirt and a pair of jeans that fit and a nicer pair of sneakers. And so just do it better than what you're currently doing, as opposed to having to totally change your wardrobe.
How about accessories? How can a guy get the most out of, watches, jewelry? Are there other accessories that, I think women have a lot of them. Like what other accessories outside of, maybe a necklace, some bracelets, earrings, and a watch for a guy?
The best way for guys to think about accessories is to treat it kind of like tattoos, where if you're going to do it, it has to have some meaning to it or some sort of symbolism. And so get it as, it's awesome if it's like a wedding gift, or it's a family heirloom that your dad owned or that your grandpa owned. Or if it's not something like that, buy something when you're traveling that can remind you of that great trip, or you hit 5 years of being self-employed, or you finally get that 100K in the bank or whatever else it may be. Buy yourself something that you can inject some meaning and some symbolism to it, and then wear that as a reminder of, look at this accomplishment, or look at this trip, or this is the heritage that I come from, or anything like that. But if you're going to do accessories, have some meaning and some symbolism to it.
My personal style fashion has, it's evolved, obviously, just like most guys do. I think I'm at the point now, I'm 39, I'm a bigger guy. I'm 6'3", almost 250. I competed as a bodybuilder. So I had a lot of trouble, while being a bodybuilder.
Not easy to fit.
Not at all. I think there was one store that I can buy something off the rack, Buckle. I don't know if you guys have that out west, but they made these bigger, with a tapered waist. I've gotten to the point now, Tanner, it's, for me, it's most oftentimes it's a black staple t-shirt, something from Nordstrom's, Saks, throw on a nice pair of slacks, and then maybe accessorize with a watch and a clean, crisp pair of shoes. That's what I found has worked for me.
Right. But at the same time, like, you've got your Lions Not Sheep hat on, and I can immediately tell things about you from a philosophical, political, entrepreneurial perspective, just based on that one hat and the tribe affiliation that's associated in there, right? And you do that on purpose. You want to be part of Sean's tribe. You want other guys who are in it to know that you're in it, and you want other people who may be adverse to it to know to steer clear a little bit, because you're part of that too. And so there's a bit of both conformity and also courage by wearing something that can be as polarizing as Lions Not Sheep apparel.
Yeah, I was at the gym earlier today. I had a Lions Not Sheep shirt on, and I had another hat from Dixon Flannel that says pedophile hunter.
There you go.
Which, brother, that hat has gotten more just comments. I had a woman ask me, where was I? I was in Nashville. She goes, "Is that real?" And I touched it, and I'm like, it feels real. She's like, no. Are you actually out there hunting? And I'm actually affiliated with some anti-human trafficking organizations. So there's an element of truth kind of sitting behind it. But no, I mean,
you're not just LARPing it.
Yeah, no, and that's that's why I've repped Sean stuff. During the Trump era, I was the MAGA hat guy. Like, I'm not afraid to put my beliefs out there, because I know my identity. I know who I am, and I want the world to know that as well.
Right, and that people will feel like that's very specific, but that happens. You can tell by somebody if they're wearing a rainbow flag, or if in 2023 they're still wearing a mask, or whatever else. Like, we do this all the time. We do it subconsciously. Just start to think about it more consciously, because you're missing out on the real potency of the tool if you're not really giving it the thought and the attention that it deserves.
So you made it really clear that there's no, absolute must that a guy has to have. Are there things that men should avoid? Like don't go down this path. Don't wear this.
Yeah. Okay. So I think the best way to be able to talk through this, because there's certain things where it's like, don't show up in samurai armor or a pink gorilla suit or dress like George Washington or Napoleon, right? Like, we kind of all know those really extreme things that you shouldn't be wearing. 10 years ago, you wouldn't have had to tell the average dude, don't do what Harry Styles and GQ says by wearing a dress. Now you have to have that conversation. And you can think about it kind of like, I assume you're familiar with the Overton window.
Partially, but can you?
I'll explain it just in case some of the listeners aren't as well. So you can think about the Overton window as kind of like this area of political or philosophical discourse that is acceptable for people to talk about. And so you go back 200 years ago in the United States, it was entirely acceptable for people to talk about how Christianity and colonialism are God's way of bringing Christ to the uncivilized nations, right? And nobody was talking about trans rights or Black Lives Matter 200 years ago. Now it's the opposite way. You can't talk about the morals of colonialism. That's ridiculous. Nobody's going to talk about that. But you're certainly going to have people in certain spheres talking about trans rights or whatever else it may be. And so, what it is that is acceptable for people to talk about shifts as culture flows and evolves. Make sense? Okay. The same thing happens with our clothing. Again, like we talked about a few minutes ago, the suit was the 20th century staple of status and authority. It's not now. It hasn't entirely moved out of that Overton window. But if you show up in like a top hat with spats and a walking stick, you're way outside that aesthetic window. It's moved too far. And so I would say the one thing that you should never do is be too far outside whatever your own world's aesthetic window is, because you're not going to be able to, you're basically going to signal that you're too socially obtuse to understand what's going on in the world around you.
Got it. No, that's great.
But again, subjective, right?
Absolutely. What about jerseys? Like I've spoken out for years about not having another man's name on your back. This is just kind of a personal belief. What are your thoughts around sports jerseys? Are they youthful? Is it something, once you become a grown man, you should stop? Like what's your thoughts on that?
Oh man, how deep down this rabbit hole do you want to go?
As deep as you're willing to go, bro.
My personal opinion with this is, yeah, I agree. You should never wear another man's name on your back. That's kind of like, it's a version of cucking yourself, right? And then in addition to that, like, dude, be a fan of sports, but don't have your identity be rooted in the accomplishment of other men. Like, if you spend more time watching football than you do playing pickup football with your buddies or doing something like that with your kids, your balance is backwards. And so don't be reliving don't do Uncle Rico from Napoleon Dynamite, where you're living the glory days from the past, where you're so obsessed with the accomplishments of other men. By all means, like, enjoy sports, enjoy being a fan. You can even, like, if it's your alma mater, if you're really big on a team, like, wear something to the game, that's fine. But if this is what you're wearing day in and day out, or like your favorite teams are in your Twitter bio or your Instagram bio, where people know that you spend more time and get more emotionally animated talking about what other men are doing with a ball than what you've got going on with your own life, you're a spectator instead of an actor. Like, you're not in the arena, you're passive, and there's not much that's masculine about that.
Yeah, and it goes back to, I mean, kind of an underlying theme we're talking about all day, or this entire time, is that identity, right? These guys that are putting their identity in these other men's, it's we won the championships, it's we. It's like, no, they did it. Like, you had
they don't know your name, dude. They have no idea who you are. You're not a we if it only goes one direction.
Exactly. One thing I wanted, this is really a personal, man. I'm just, maybe coach me a little bit, and maybe I won't take any of this advice. So I've been an at-home entrepreneur for almost a decade now, so I was working from home pre-pandemic. The first 6 months a year, I was very intentional because I was transitioning out of working in an office. I got up, I showered, I put clothes on. I literally walked outside and walked back in almost as if I was entering into an office. Once I got kind of the disciplines built where I knew, like, I could just wake up and go to work, like, I've kind of lived truthfully outside of, like, maybe putting on a top for a podcast. I've lived in gym clothes because, like I said, I've been a bodybuilder, so I've spent a lot of time being active. I mean, I've even made jokes here when I've had some of these conversations that you have a shirt on, but I don't have any pants on, which I do have pants on today. But I know you, like, I mean, you work at home, but I mean, like, are you getting dressed like every day intentionally? Like, what are your thoughts around why a guy, if he's working from home, would put effort into dressing if nobody's going to see him in the outside world?
Yeah, that's a great question. So first of all, dude, I've got 6 kids under the age of 10. There have been way too many times where I've done a client call without pants on because I'm scrambling to, like, deal with kids and everything. So I'm in that same territory for sure. But the reality is, ideally, you would be dressing differently. And it's not because it has anything to do with impressing other people. I'm sure that you've dealt with this because it's the same. I've been working from home for 6 years. This was, like, way prior to the pandemic. And, like, we homeschool our kids and everything. Like, we kind of just exist in this nebulousness of never really being clocked in, never really being clocked out, all of that type of stuff. But the problem is that everything does then start to bleed together, right? And so I would say for guys like us who work from home, even if you can have something as simple as when I clock in or when I start work, I put on shoes. And when I clock out, I take them off, or I throw on the vest, or I put on a hat, because it is a mental and emotional trigger to help you recognize when you're on and when you're off. And it helps you be able to make those transitions from work mode to dad mode, or husband mode, or date mode, or buddy mode, or sports mode, or whatever else it may be. And so clothing, just like music, just like environment and location, can be a really good tool to help you shift mental and emotional gears so you're more present in what you're doing and you're better able to separate from the stuff that you're not doing. And so that's the reason I would say it matters.
Oh, that's great, man. And that's actually really good for me to hear, because I do have certain hats that are work hats, right? I have gym hats, but when I'm at the desk, like for me, a hat is, I mean, which I'd love to have your thoughts around having hats on, because I am a 95% of the time have hat. I have long kind of curly hair. It's shaved up on the side, kind of a mullet look. But it's hard to manage. And it's like, well, I'm going to be sweating, in the morning, and I don't always have time to shower. So it's easy to just throw a hat on all the time. But there are specific ones that, like, when I'm at work, like, these are my work hats. And then when I'm going to go to the gym, I'm going to go outside and, go for a run or for a walk, different hats. So I without even consciously knowing what I was doing, I kind of like already have been practicing what you teach there.
Yeah. And that's even like the embodiment of like, let me put my different hat on. You talk about, oh, I'm in CEO mode, I'm going to put on my CEO hat, or I'm in grunt mode, I'm going to put on my grunt hat. And like, that really is what you do. And so I love that you're already, because that's perfect. It does help you just shift gears mentally into, I'm at the gym or I'm at work. And I would imagine, because you've done it long enough, that it would feel a little bit weird. It wouldn't be totally detrimental, but you would have a little buzz in the back of your head if you walked into the gym with a work hat on, or if you're doing a podcast with one of your gym hats on, where it's like, something's not quite right. It's an itch that I can't scratch. It's a little bit off, and that's a problem. Yeah.
Yep. You talk a lot about these archetypes. I think there's three
Mm-hmm.
style archetypes. Can you break those down for us? And are
Yeah.
these
So
yours?
yeah, these are mine.
Okay.
This is me trying to, this was, man, probably 8 years ago, really trying to suss this out and figure this out, because what I found, yeah, the framework, because really, like, good style, and like we've already hit on, like, it has to start on the inside. It has to start with your identity, right? It is not, this is what some YouTuber or some magazine says is on trend, so I'm going to go buy that because I want to be on trend. It has to start on the inside and start to work its way out. And archetypes are a very good framework when it comes to a lot of things. And so the way that I teach this is, you've got three of them. It's three R's, makes it easy to remember. It's rugged, refined, and rakish. And with all three of these, they're primarily rooted in how you interact with and thrive best in the world. So rugged guys are best in the physical world. They work with their hands. They're at their happiest when they're actually getting physical things done. They can see tangible evidence of what it is that they've accomplished. These are the guys that they need particular types of clothing that actually has that kind of durability, breathability, mobility, and all of that. But that type of clothing usually has an aesthetic component that comes with it too. And so they should dress in a way that reinforces that ruggedness. Refined guys do best at understanding social hierarchies and mores, class systems and structures, corporate systems, and all of that. They really understand all these rules. They love playing by the rules, and they know how to be able to like thrive by doing their best at that. And then depending on your different, again, your environment, your industry, your job, if you understand all of those hierarchical rules, then you can dress in a way that helps reflect that and helps you get ahead in that regard. So that's the refined. And then the third one is rakish, which these are the guys who socially understand the hierarchy and the rules just as well as the refined guys do. But rather than thriving by breaking or by following the rules, they thrive by breaking the rules. These are the guys that are the rock stars, the iconoclasts, the outsiders, the gang guys, whatever. Like, these are the guys who love being rebels, and too much conformity makes them feel like they're selling out or that they're betraying themselves. And so they need to understand the rules so that they know how to break them effectively, but they need to break them effectively. And most of us will have elements of all three of those within us. We're not just one dimensionally one to the exclusion of the other, but we'll all have a fairly unique ratio. And most of the time, there's one that comes out ahead of the other two. And that's what you want to base most of your clothing decisions around.
Got it. What would you say, you're more of the rakish or the rugged, personally?
I would actually, here's one of the things that's really interesting about this is, even as you go through different phases in life, those ratios can change. And so when I worked in custom suiting for a while, I was very refined rakish. And then as I started getting more into combat sports, getting more into strength training, it started to shift more into like a rugged rakish. And then now I would say rakish is probably leaning out more as the primary, with rugged and refined coming in as close, like second and third tied in there for me right now.
No, that's great. We're both somewhat in the, in the personal men's, self development, personal development space. Who do you see kind of, in this space that's, maybe leading, outside of yourself, right? But this is your focus. Maybe guys that aren't talking about fashion, but just through their style and appearance. Is there anybody that kind of comes to top of mind right now that's out there that is really, I guess, leading a trend, creating trends?
Yeah, that's a good question. This is a hard one for me. This is actually one that I've really struggled with because it seems like so many guys in the men's space still continue to maintain their aversion to this whole concept. But guys that I've seen really kind of take it and run with it, I think the biggest one, as controversial as he is Andrew Tate. Like he's
Mm-hmm.
got a very specific aesthetic that you can recognize, and a lot of guys really kind of identify with as part of his brand, is that he's got an aesthetic to him, right? So Tate's a good one. I would say Sean Whalen, obviously another one, like with what he's doing with Lions Not Sheep. Ryan Mickler over at Order of Man is doing a lot with this kind of stuff as well. But I would love to see more guys. I personally feel like one of my kind of one of my little, fervent hopes is that as we get more guys who are embracing this kind of unapologetically masculine and are really trying to go in this more integrated, more whole, not one-dimensional, like beers, boobs, and bacon version of masculinity, that we actually see an aesthetic come out that a lot of us can really kind of identify with and jump on, but we haven't seen much of that yet.
Yeah, no, I love that. Fan of all three of those guys. We've had both Sean and Ryan on the show, and I've obviously been following what Tate has been doing for a while. I'm a fan of his. He's got a muscular physique, very athletic looking, and he's figured out a way to make it very simple with a solid color T-shirt, a nice assortment of blazers, and very well fitting jeans, which is
Yep, the
can be.
loafers and the really like lightweight seasonal stuff and the aviator sunglasses. Like he keeps it simple, but it's a distinct uniform for him for sure.
Yeah, yeah. What are your thoughts on Jordan Peterson? I had an opportunity to see him perform live, and he's coming back to Tampa here in a couple weeks. And I got some buddies that are going. And when I went and saw him, I had the whole VIP package, and he had been talking about how he put so much effort into his dress, the rocking of the suits, and how he wants to see this begin to kind of become more of a focus for men. So I had a nice blazer on, very I followed a Tate look to go see him, right? Like very nice shirt, but very well fitted blazer. And I had some of my friends that are going. I was like, guys, we gotta show up for JP. And they're like, that's not me. I'm not. So I'm just curious your thoughts on what JP is doing out there.
So I would say that in general, I'm like 85% on board with what Peterson is doing. The only reasons that I would say I'm not, one is I know he's just recently, like he had a company that just started doing these really kind of crazy out there suits that represent his different rules. So he has like the heaven and hell, or there's this new one that everybody's calling like the Smurf uniform, where it's the corduroy with the bright blue and all of that. And so he's, from a philosophical perspective, I love what he's doing by trying to embody different virtues within the clothing. But again, it's too far outside that aesthetic window. And so it doesn't quite work. And with some of them, it seems to sacrifice his credibility a little bit. It almost makes him look a little bit cartoonish with some of those. So those have gone too far. But I've loved what he's done prior to that, because you go watch some of his old lectures and he just looks like your typical dopey professor. And then he started doing the 3-piece suits or the really kind of aggressive stuff, and it's been so good on him. The only reason that I would say that it's a problem from like a setting the standard perspective is that Peterson is a product of the 20th century. His age, his status, the university credibility, and everything else like that, he still is very much a 20th century guy. And so the suits are very, very good for him. But for the rest of us, they don't quite work. If we were all to start wearing suits like JP, when our credibility isn't based on the same, like I'm not an academic, you're not an academic, right? We're not in the university system. We're not in our 60s. We're not dealing with all of these same kind of like authority structures and hierarchies. And so it's so good for him, but it's not emulable for us. There's a gap there between him and us.
No, yeah, no, I agree. I agree a lot with the vast majority of that. I think I saw that blue one that you were talking about. I think it was in his interview with John Vervaeke, and I'm like, come on, Jordan, like that's
Yeah.
like kind of
You don't need to go that far. You've got it, so like go back 2 years and you hit your
yeah.
stride perfectly. We don't need to keep pushing it. Yeah.
Yeah, but he's a capitalist man, and he's out there, and I'm sure he's getting paid very, very well to rock some of those items. Talk about dressing with your spouse. Like whether it's weddings or events or even to Sunday church. You see couples that are like they look like they came out of a Ken and Barbie package together. Like what are you like? What's going on there?
I would say for the most part, don't worry about what your wife is wearing. Like you want to match the same level of formality where, if she's going out in high-waisted jeans and like a slouchy, like an oversized sweatshirt, I'm not going to be throwing on some Balmorals and a sport coat. Like there's too much dissonance there between the formality of what I'm wearing and what she's wearing, right? And so I would say go with that. But the problem is if you get more complimentary or more matchy beyond that, then what you're reinforcing to yourself and the signal you're sending to everybody else is I am essentially my wife's handbag. Like she's the one who makes all the decisions and she made my decisions. So I don't have enough autonomy or sovereignty to be able to dress myself. She doesn't have enough respect for me to dress me in a way that makes me look like I'm my own individual person. She basically just sees me as an accessory or as a way to complement whatever her aesthetic is. That may not actually be the case, but by and large, because of most men's indifference to clothing, that's what it ends up being perceived as. And a lot of times that's what ends up being reinforced to yourself. So for 99% of guys, just match your level of formality and then do
Yeah.
your own thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I heard was it's okay to allow your wife to dress you, but let her dress you in your own identity, not in the identity that she's trying to create for you. I dated a woman and she worked in, kind of high end fashion and whatnot. So we would go shopping together and she would help make some of these selections, but it's not like you need to wear this because I'm going to wear this. It's like, no, you're going to wear that because that's going to be the representation of you. So it's okay to let the woman help. Just don't look like you guys came in a matching set together.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. You mentioned six kids. I know this
Yeah.
is kind of, maybe outside of the realm of what we've been talking about. How much, focus do you put into your kids' attire? And this is something that you're teaching them.
So I have 5 girls and 1 son. He's my second. He's about to turn 9. Yeah. So poor kid is very outnumbered. And my wife and I have definitely, like, we put a lot of time and effort into buying their clothes and buying things that we like. And we kind of do big, like we're about to do a good like spring, summer purchase. And then we'll do a fall, winter one. And we just kind of like do it all at those 2 times in the year. But now with my 2 oldest, they're starting to get to where they have their own opinions about things that they want to wear because it's the things that their friends wear or it's representative of the hobbies that they're into or things like that. With those 2, we're backing off a little bit more. And honestly, like my son, he's really big into Zelda. And so he wears Zelda graphic t-shirts. And personally, it drives me crazy, but it's really important for him to be able to make those connections between self-expression with his clothing, that part of the way that he can express himself is through his clothing. And so buy those and we'll let him do that. And I mean, even just like my little girls, they still, I'm pretty sure that my 4th and 5th right now, one of them's wearing a pink princess dress and the other one's wearing a rainbow dash dress. You know what I mean? Like kids naturally will play pretend and become part of the world based on what they're dressing up as. And so we try to help reinforce that and help them do that in the bigger picture of things, not just in the pretend picture of things too.
Yeah. Yeah. Once again, sounds like you're letting them kind of express their own, identity within a, maybe a parameters that you guys are, like you're not going to be a dinosaur, maybe you want to represent some dinosaurs, but yeah, that's awesome.
Where it's like, yeah, sorry guys, we're going to church. And so you can't wear the princess dresses or you can't wear your BJJ gi, even though you're stoked that you got that first stripe. Like we're not doing this to church. There are things that we have expectations for here, but yeah, we try to provide as much freedom on that as we can.
I love that. Talk about gym. Like, is gym attire something that men need to be paying attention to? Does it matter? I mean, you're going there to sweat, like obviously, once again, it's a representation of who you are, but how much focus maybe personally do you put into your gym attire and then with the men that you work with?
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing to pay attention to is kind of what we already hit on is what is it that you can wear that can make you the most present in what it is that you're doing? Because clothing has gotten, I mean, dude, you can buy really super stretchy suits that have the same range of motion as your gym clothes do. But if you wear one of those to go work out, it's going to be bugging you and you're not going to be able to be fully present. You're going to feel really weird by working out in a suit, right? And so a lot of times guys will say, I don't care what I wear as long as it doesn't affect my range of motion. And it's like, that's not quite the case. So you want to wear something that gives you the most, that helps you be the most present. But at the same time, you go to any commercial gym and you can tell the difference between the guys who are into bodybuilding versus the guys who are into powerlifting. Or you see photos and it's like, that dude's into CrossFit. He's not into jujitsu. Or, you know, like triathletes dress a little bit differently than just road cyclists. And so there are different tribes based on the type of working out that you like to do. And most of us will naturally gravitate toward dressing in a way that reflects belonging to that tribe. And I would say if that helps you feel more present or makes your gym experience more enjoyable, lean into that. If I know I personally would feel ridiculous if I showed up to to BJJ wearing my triathlon kit. And it may do like it may be fine if it's a no gi day, like I could still get the job done, but I would feel ridiculous wearing my cycling bibs and a jersey as opposed. And so, like, what is it that can help you feel the most present? What is it that can help you be the most, just perform at your best in what the gym environment is? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I love that. Talked about Sean, you know, you mentioned Mickler as well with his order of man branding and stuff like that. You know, I've heard, you know, different style guys and different, you know, I don't know if they'd be coaches, but there's guys that are talking about this, say avoid wearing clothing that has labels or clothing that has brands on. It doesn't sound like this is something that you subscribe to 100%.
Yeah, I wouldn't say 100%, although I do go pretty far. I would say I hit that pretty hard. And the big reason why, again, this is what we've talked about, is you don't want to either communicate to other people or reinforce to yourself that your identity is rooted in the consumption of a product or you're belonging to somebody else's business or something else that way. You want to be your own person and your own brand. That's probably the biggest thing, especially because most guys, like, they just wear these giant t-shirts. And it's always funny because, like, you know, I've been on Mickler's show a few times. I'm friends with Sean, and it's like the things that I'm teaching guys kind of undermine some of your main product sales. but you do want to be able to make it so that when you do wear those things, it's not that you're leading with, I'm a Sean fan, or I'm really big into, I don't know, Coors Light or vintage Metallica or whatever else it may be. Like, you want to be your own brand instead of a consumer of somebody else's accomplishments.
Yeah, like I'll wear, you know, a lot of Sean's stuff, you know, that's got meaning kind of behind it. He's got that One Nation Under God shirt, you know, but if I'm going to wear a Lions Not Sheep shirt, I'm not going to pair it with a Lions Not Sheep hat. It's like, hey, I'm not a model for this company. Sean's not paying me to wear any of his clothing. But, you know, once again, it's like, for me, there's I guess there's messages kind of being sent behind some of what I'm wearing, and it is integrated into my identity.
Yeah, I think personally, one of the things that I would love to see more of is, and it's hard because, I mean, anybody who starts a business, it's really easy to just come up with a logo and print t-shirts with it. I would love to see more of a move towards sending those types of signals, but have it be less with like words or graphics or big bold things, and instead have it be like, I don't know, maybe you wear a t-shirt that it has like two stripes on the left sleeve and it's a little bit more subtle that, because again, you go look at other cultures and you look at like what different Native American tribes would wear, or what different parts of like Eastern Europe would wear, and the way that they would use it. Like, look at the Scottish, like the plaids. It's not like they would specifically write out, I belong to this clan, but the plaids would actually be representative of those things. And so I would love to see a less direct version of being able to send signals or belong to particular tribes, as opposed to I have these big garish words that say I belong to this tribe, or this is the cause that I believe in.
You said you've been, I think, writing for 12 years. You've been working full time for 6. I mean, in that 12 years, I mean, there's been trends that have, you know, come and gone. And it's kind of like, you know, we're now back in, you know, there's a point, you know, in the gym space where, you know, 10, 6, 7, 8 years ago, like super long shorts, you know, almost kind of below the knee. That was the thing. And now it's like they're getting shorter and shorter, shorter, almost kind of going back to like the 70s. How have you seen the trends evolve over the years that you've been in it? And how much attention do you pay to trends and influence yourself, and then how you advise and coach your clients?
Trendiness, as far as coaching and all of that, really again comes down to kind of how much effort you want to put into it, but it also has a lot to do with what your relative statuses within a particular group or tribe or anything. The higher your status is, the more you can get away with starting or embracing new trends. And the lower it is, the more you're better to kind of play it safe in the middle, is kind of the best rule of thumb to be able to think about. And again, that's different for every guy. But man, as far as the trends that I've seen, I mean, I remember when we graduated high school, I remember I would sneak to the thrift store to buy girl pants because those were the only things that were skinny enough to be able to look like the BMX and punk rock kid that I was. Like, I would have to wear literal girl pants. And now you see that high school kids are embracing really full baggy stuff again, like we were. Like, it's not quite at Janko level, but it's really big and full skinny stuff. In fact, I just posted a meme about this because this just popped up the other day, where it's like people over 30 when they think of dad jeans and it's big baggy full stuff, and people under 30 when they think of dad jeans and it's skinny jeans, because that's just like how things have generationally shifted. And that's how trends go, is they wax and wane, and it's always just like a, I reject what it was before, and so I overcorrect and I embrace something different, and that's just kind of part of the process. And so the safest way to play it is to just stick with things that are kind of like neutral in their fit. Do slim jeans instead of skinny or baggy. Do a normal size lapel instead of a skinny lapel or a super fat one. I would also say that this is where grooming can come into play a lot, is if you're relatively neutral in your clothing, like you, by doing the mullet, like that's very much on trend, but you're relatively neutral in your clothing. And so that anchors it. And then you can go with the mullet, as opposed to you've got the mullet and the high waisted, really baggy, and like the latest, I'm sure the Nike Cortezes, because those were popular a year ago, are now like a dad version of shoes anyway. You know what I mean? Like, you don't. And so if you're not all in on all of it, but you're relatively neutral on something, then you can afford to play around with one aspect that's a little bit more on trend than anything else.
Yeah. Does it, guys, I guess maybe a size or structure play into how he should be dressing? For me, I'm most rooms I walk into, I'm going to be one of the biggest guys. Like, I'm immediately going to get eyeballs. I don't need a shirt or anything to pull attention to me. Almost at times is I almost kind of want to downplay. That's why I've kind of really leaned into these darker, more neutral, kind of solid black, or just something that's going to be very simplistic, because hey, it's like I'm here already. I don't need a shirt to project and make an announcement that I'm here. How much does size and structure play into how a guy should be
Quite a
dressing?
bit. In fact, I'll give you the three most consistent things that I see that are kind of pitfalls for guys. First one is the one that you talked about, where guys who are really big and very well built have a tendency to wear stuff that's way too like tight and constrictive. And it comes across as this almost desperation of, please acknowledge that I have abs, because I have no self-worth if you don't see my abs. Right?
You know, a lot of
And
those
this is
guys.
where a lot of those guys, right? And so what these guys will do best, one of my good friends and a former client, Greg O'Gallagher from Kino Body, he does this super well, where he wears things that, yes, you can tell he's in good shape, but that's a secondary or like a supplementary feature. It's not the main thing that he wants you to pay attention to, right? And so guys who are in really good shape, you want it to be one positive out of many things. You're multifaceted. It's not that the only good thing you have going for you is your physique. So that's the first one. Second one is really big guys that are dealing with a higher percentage of body fat, you're overweight, whatever it may be. A lot of these guys have a tendency to wear things that are baggy, thinking that it's going to hide their size, and it doesn't. What it does is it sends the signal that not only am I overweight, but I'm also sloppy. And so I'm overweight because I'm sloppy, because I lack self-discipline. And so it exacerbates the problem as opposed to hiding it. And so you don't wear really skinny, constrictive stuff, but you still focus on things that fit you well, because yes, you may be at a different size than what you'd like, or I guess what the rest of the world likes, but you're still self-disciplined enough that you pay attention to how things fit and how well they look and all of that. And so it helps to offset that a little bit. And then the third one is for guys who are on the shorter side. And this is relative. I have some guys that are 5'10" and are really self-conscious about being short. And it's like, sorry, 5'10" isn't short. Like, you're 6'2", I'm 6. Like, and maybe I can say that because I'm not 5'10", but 5'10" is not short. Even 5'8" is kind of average. But a lot of these guys have a tendency to get super self-conscious about it. And so they will wear anything they can to make themselves look taller. And again, what that communicates is, I'm aware of this, but I'm very self-conscious of it. I'm not confident about who I am. I need the validation of other people in order to reckon. And so instead, just wear what you would wear irrespective of your height. Wear things that fit well, wear things that look good. Yeah, maybe you avoid horizontal stripes because it can exacerbate the problem, but you don't always have to be in vertical stripes. You don't always have to be in solid colors. You don't want to look like you're self-conscious about an unchangeable aspect of your physiology. It's the same thing with like, if you have to wear glasses, don't wear glasses that look like they're trying to disappear. Wear really big, bold, unapologetic glasses. If you're going bald, don't try to do a comb over and hide it. Shave it and lean into being bald. Anything that's like a defect or anything that's like less than ideal, go towards it instead of trying to work away from it.
Yeah, I think a lot of that with the shorter guys is a byproduct of, called red pill or manosphere. It's, it's like this, women want guys that are 6'2" and above. And it's like, if you're not, it's like you're going to fall into this, 80% of men that are never going to have a chance. And, so many guys get caught up with following too many people that are just, they're regurgitating BS from evolutionary psychology. It's like, there's other factors that are playing to all of this.
So many more. It's not just your height.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. There are plenty of short kings out there. So embrace that. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely, brother. Tanner, this has been absolutely incredible, man. I'd love to, if you can, no matter where a guy is at right now, whether he's just getting started, maybe it's the first time he's even being aware or beginning to pay attention to some of this thing. Is there one or two things that a guy can maybe do today to immediately improve his style?
Yeah. So the first thing that I would do is I would say, get rid of any t-shirt that has a graphic on it and instead focus on solid. You can do the graphics with hats. That's an easier way to do it because it's a little bit more subtle, but get rid of your t-shirts that have any graphics or logos and focus on solids. And then I would say the second thing is to make sure your pants aren't too long. If they are really like stacking up around your ankles, they're too long. It's going to make you look short. It's going to make you look sloppy. 99% of my clients, as we do that initial closet evaluation, I have to tell them your pants are too long, go get them tailored. Like, it's such a consistent thing. And so make sure your pants are the right length. You want them to just like touch the top of your shoes, maybe fold a little bit, but these where if you've got like 3 or 4 inches of them folding up on top of themselves on top of your shoes, that's a problem.
Yeah, that was a thing in the 90s with, maybe maybe the early 2000s with the Timberland boots and the thick baggy,
right? You remember skate culture where they were like frayed because they would drag, because they were baggy and they drag behind your shoes. Like that was, but we're not in the 90s anymore. Yeah. That's a dad look. That's a grandpa look.
Yeah. Well, growing up, it's funny because we were kind of opposite. Growing up, I probably leaned a little bit more into the hip hop culture. Mm-hmm. So it's the big Tommy Hilfiger shirts and like the thick jeans and stuff like that. Exactly. With the Timberland boots. It's like you wanted those baggy, you wanted that crunch up there at the bottom. There's going to be so many people that yell at me if I don't ask your take on Crocs, because Hormozy started rocking them. I'm like, what? Let me see. And brother, they're absolutely they're so comfortable, man. I mean, I will wear them probably more places than I should. When is it appropriate for a guy? Is it ever appropriate for a grown man to?
That's about it. And even then, there's so many better choices than the Crocs. Hormozy is so interesting because he very much leans into the anti-aesthetic as an intentional aesthetic. Like the cutoff shorts, the nasal strip, all of it. He's very much building an aesthetic brand. It's just a giant middle finger to anything that's actually visually pleasing. It's ugliness on purpose.
Yeah, well, he knows what he's doing, man. I mean, totally. even with gym lunch, right? Like the mustache became something that, all of their clients at their events would wear. Like he knows that he's building a look that is going to be recognizable with him no matter where he goes. So and
I've got friends who work for him, and he's very specific about like, how is, like, everybody knows the Hormozy TikTok style. Like you don't create an entire TikTok messaging approach without caring about aesthetics, that it's like, it's this font and it's yellow at this point and it's green at this point and all. Like the dude very much cares. He's just choosing an anti-aesthetic as part of the aesthetic when it comes to his own clothing.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because he's getting credit for the TikTok that he didn't really start.
It's Ryan McGinn.
I'm very close friends with McGinn. He's here in St. Pete. He's 35 minutes across the way. But obviously,
Ryan's awesome.
Dude, I love Ryan. He was in your space, man. Did you guys work together?
That's how we first became friends. Is we spoke at a conference called StyleCon back in 2014. And so Ryan and I have been good buddies forever. And I always send him TikToks when people are like, the Hormozy style. It's like, that's your style.
Yeah, I was with McGinn months back. September, I think we were in Vegas together. I've known Ryan for years, man. I've attended some of his video events.
He's spent a good amount of time right now.
Oh, dude, I'm so happy for him, man, because he struggled, man. He's openly talked about this, with finding, he always knew who he was.
Because it was fashion, and then it was GoPro, and then it was everything else. And so for him to be able to make the short form, and you guys, if you follow him, McGinn's a really good example of graphic t-shirts done well, because he's got that like 80s rock and roll ethos to it. And so you don't see him wearing a band shirt and think that he's obsessed with that band. you just see it as part of his overall aesthetic. So Ryan's a really good example of a good way to do graphic
Yeah,
t-shirts.
and he talks a lot too. I'm curious your thoughts on this. We're going to wrap this up, but we'll go another minute or two here with some of the higher end things, right? Like the Gucci
Mm-hmm.
shoes and these like these. How
The
do
mule
like
loafers and all of
yeah.
that. Yeah. Yeah. And I would say Ryan's a good example of somebody who Ryan is like almost purely rakish. That he fits that
Mm-hmm.
archetype so incredibly
Yes.
well. So incredibly well. Even from his old like BMX days and everything else. Like there's just a lot of that there. And so I would say if you're looking at him, he's probably not the best example of a style you want to emulate because it's so personal for him. But he's a really good example of what a personalized style can look like that you can start pulling principles from as opposed to tactics from.
Yes. Oh, that's great. That's very, very well said. Well, Tanner, bro, this is amazing, man. I mean, I feel like I could chat with you for a long, long time. I'm looking forward to maybe doing some more things in the future together, man. Is there anything that's maybe I didn't ask you here today that like I should have, or anything we kind of left off the table here?
No, I think we hit the basics and then also got into some kind of deeper stuff. So I think we covered our bases pretty well.
Incredible, man. We'll tell the guys where where they can find you, your site, your coaching, your book, all of this, and are you actively taking clients on it all the time? How does it work? Is it group? Is it one on one? Yeah, share a little bit of how they connect, and we'll bring it to a close.
Yeah, so if you want to get kind of like the most broad overview, really like a little bit more in depth than what we've talked about, the best broad overview, you can check out my book. It's called The Appearance of Power. You can find it on Amazon and then also on Audible. You can do an audiobook version as well. The main site is masculine-style.com, and you can go and see all the stuff that's there. That's the best place to go to like. You can actually take a quiz to find out which the three archetypes is your primary one. So go take that quiz. It's 7 questions long, and that'll get you onto my mailing list where you'll be able to get more in depth on a lot of this stuff. And that's also where I talk a lot more about coaching, what it's like working with me one on one or in groups. I'm bringing in new guys consistently, and so if you're interested in coaching, that site is the best way to do that. And then if you're active on social media, I'm most frequently on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, and those are all at Tanner Guzy. And so you can go follow me and check out content there. It's a lot of like what we've done where a good percentage of it is style content, but a lot of it is just masculine self-development. I like to talk about faith, masculinity, family. I mean, even stuff that a lot of guys like therapy and masculine relationship with emotions or other things like that. And so it's kind of all of it because I'm not just interested in dressing well, I'm interested in being the best version of a man I can be in all the different arenas. And that's what I like to talk about. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And that's what attracted me to you as well, man. And that's what we're about. I say with Rebuilt Recovery, our goal is to help men become better men by quitting porn first and rebuilding their life. And all these elements, the faith, the style, the fashion, the relationship, the communication, the self-development, all play a role into that. So guys, we'll get all of Tanner's stuff plugged down there in the show notes. So Tanner, we like to end every single episode here with the same question. Obviously, the title of the show is called The Superhuman Life. For me, when I talk about living a superhuman life, I think it's a belief system. It's a way that I try to show up in the world every single day. I do come from the belief that I do think we're all here for a purpose, but knowing that or believing that, I don't think is enough. We must be very intentional about our development, about our growth, and to becoming whoever we were created to be. So that's what I like to define as far as living a superhuman life, but I love to get the guest takes. So Tanner, as we bring today's conversation to a close, how would you define living a superhuman life?
Oh, this is a good heavy question, right? Um, this kind of brings to mind some of the stuff that I've been working on right now. I'm trying to find the right balance between action-based self-respect and identity-based self-acceptance because I lean too far on the self-respect and I don't think I have enough self-expectance or self-acceptance where if I'm not constantly growing and improving, if I'm not constantly setting and meeting new goals, I start to get a pretty low perspective of who I am. And I don't think that there's a good foundation there, right? At the same time, if it's all self-acceptance and I'm perfect the way that I am or that I don't really have any need or reason to improve, then there's no real chance to see your full potential or see who it is that you actually can become. And so it's finding the right approach to how much self-acceptance and how much self-respect and how I get the balance between those two. I think if I can get that figured out, that's what it is to become a superhuman.
Incredible, man. 176 episodes. We get a lot of similar responses. That one is out of the realm of the vast majority of them, man. So
That's awesome.
action-based self-respect, intention-based self-acceptance. Incredible. Tanner, this has been an absolute honor, man. Guys, make sure to check out Tanner's stuff, The Masculine Style. We'll have all of his social there. And if you're getting value out of these conversations, we're so grateful for every single one of you guys. We've seen a lot of growth here over these last few months, and it's because of you guys. So if you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to leave us a 5-star rating and written review. But more importantly, if there's a guy in your life, maybe it's your best friend, maybe for the females out there, maybe it's your husband, maybe it's your brother. If this is going to be valuable for him, do us a favor, do him the blessing by sharing today's conversation. But for Mr. Tanner Guzy, Frank Rich, your host here, we love you guys, and we'll see you next week.